So we are excited to move on to our keynote presentation. Our keynote speaker is Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. And to introduce him, I'd like to turn it over to our rides coach and facilitator, Isaiah McGee. Isaiah, over to you.
All right, thank you, Candace. I appreciate this opportunity to be here. I am super excited here for our keynote speaker here this afternoon. I have known Dr. Moore for a number of years, and he's had a profound influence on my own personal equity growth from my college days up into my professional days here as well too. So I'm super excited for him to keynote, particularly given the stakes I think that Darnisa and Lee were able to present to us just a few minutes ago in our opening kind of salvo here. Dr. Moore has pursued and achieved success in academia, business, diversity, leadership, and community service. In 1996, wow, a long time ago, he started America and More LLC to provide comprehensive diversity, privilege, and leadership training and workshops. Dr. Moore is recognized as one of the nation's top speakers and educators. His interview with Wisconsin Public Radio won a 2015 Wisconsin Broadcasters Association as Best Interview in Medium Market Radio, first place. And he was featured in the film I'm Not Racist, Am I? Dr. Moore is the founder and program director of the White Privilege Conference. In 2014, Dr. Moore founded the Privilege Institute, which engages people in research, education, action, and leadership through workshops, conferences, publications, strategic partnerships, and relationships. He's also the co-founder of the online journal, Understanding and Dismantling Privilege, and he's the co-editor of Everyday White People Confront Racial and Social Injustice, 15 Stories, a beautiful book, as well as the next book I'm going to mention, The Guide for White Women Who Teach Black Boys, the Diversity Consultant Cookbook, and Preparing for the Challenge in 2019. Teaching Beautiful, Brilliant Black Girls, which is coming out here shortly or pretty soon, and Little E, which is a children's book. That's a book about the big misunderstanding. For 10 years, he served as the director for diversity at the Brooklyn Friends School in New York, the Bush School in Seattle, as well as the director of diversity at Central College and Cornell College as well too. Dr. Moore received his PhD from the University of Iowa in education leadership, and his PhD research is on Black football players at Division III schools in the Midwest. So I am excited again to welcome my good friend and colleague and mentor, Dr. Moore.
All right, Isaiah, thank you. Only my 4500 Zoom call, and I still forgot to unmute, but thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. I want to send a big thanks to the team, to everybody involved in making this event happen. It's always nice to hear your old college student call you old in a really unique and creative way. So thank you for that. But seriously, I've really enjoyed our work together and looking forward to, these next 25 years, especially in Iowa, but across the Midwest, if not the nation. And today, family, I'm gonna just really be talking with y'all a little bit about some of what I've been seeing in reference to the work as it relates to, the ABCDs and what y'all are doing, what RIDES is doing. I feel like those things have been closely aligned, are closely aligned. And so it's been really easy for me to find some connection to that. But as Isaiah mentioned, since 1996, I've been really grappling, talking really across the nation, across the world, really having some conversations about these topics. In addition to that, I founded the White Privilege Conference in 1999, and finding that conference also over the years has really put me in some positions and some unique challenges when it comes to just having these conversations, especially when it relates to K-12, public sector, as well as the super private sector. So that's really where all of that has come to this culmination of America's changing. Stay woke. First of all, how many of you consider yourself woke? What does that even mean? So really just having some conversations, some thoughts, some perspective about all the things related to that, closely aligned to what you've already been doing with the ABCDs. So let me roll that out. You're looking at my contact slide right now. If I can be a resource moving forward, this is how you stay in touch. And I'll share this with Candace and the team, and she can put it out and put it and share it with folks. But you can email me directly as well if you want to get this directly sent to your inbox. Okay, so this is my contact slide, but let me get started because I want to leave some time for some questions if any of you have so many questions of any type. All right, so here we go. I mean, I'm starting with the quote that I pulled directly from the website. My thought was, I mean, how are we doing? I mean, Thurgood Marshall said years ago in reference to Brown v. Education, unless the children begin to learn together, there's really no hopes for us living together. I would say working together and community together. My question always is, looking at this, how are we doing? How's America doing in reference to accomplishing this goal that I think Thurgood laid out so profoundly in 1974? Are we making progress? Are we moving forward? Are we woke? I mean, that's what I really thought about when I really was reflecting on that in preparation for this. America's changing. I mean, y'all know this. I mean, everybody knows this. I don't have to read through this. This is just a basic demographic slide about the changes that are happening in America. So I'm not going to bore y'all by going through each of these graphics. The bottom line is what we look like, 25 years ago is different today. And what the demographics are showing for the next 25 years are increasingly more and more diverse. All right, that's not news to any of you, I'm sure. What's, I think, important for us to also understand, which ties directly into the academics, the scholarship, the learning, the preparation, like what we have to know because of what students, families, communities are bringing to the school building, even to the higher ed arena, is very different. The knowledge, the preparation, the skills has to be different these next 25 years than they were, I would argue, even the previous 25 years. Just take this last year alone, from pandemic to the headlines that we've seen across our nation in reference to police assassinations, police killings, police stops. I mean, so many different things in different ways. I don't know about y'all, but I am not the same person I was last spring. And if I was coming to work with you in the school building, especially a white person, I would be a different person today. So it's not that we're only experiencing demographics that are different. The kinds of issues, the knowledge we have to have, the preparation, the skills we need to be able to have success in the school building, I argue, are going to be very different. Now, not only did we have a year 2020 to remember, 2021, let us not forget, got off to one heck of a start as well. Now, I don't know about your school buildings, your school districts, but what we're finding is the people who attended the insurrection are still in our schools, in our classrooms. I mean, I've been asking school districts, are you allowed to hire white supremacists? Or in a different way, are you screening for white supremacists? Or are white supremacists are all welcome here at your school, on your school board, in your school classroom, in your school administration? I think that as we look at the knowledge, the preparation, the skills, which I think aligns closely with the academics, the knowledge that we have to possess as school leaders, educators in the next 25 years is very different. It's not just demographics that we have to talk about when we talk about America changing. we got to talk about the skills, the preparation, the knowledge we need. I put just a few books that I'm fond of that have been helpful for me over these last 10 years. I think there's more and more knowledge coming out. There's going to be more and more publications. Maybe some of you are going to be producing some of those publications. But when we think about skill building, the academics, my question is, are you ready? Can you face Eddie today, spring 2021, which is very different than the Eddie from spring 2020? Are you ready for my son, my kids, and some of the possible trauma, frustration, concerns they may have? What about our Asian Pacific Islander community and some of their families and some of what they're bringing to the school buildings, some of the ways that they're thinking that may be different as we look at the next 25 years? These are the ways in which I'm hoping people are beginning to put some knowledge, some preparation, some skill development into these topics. America's changing. I just want to be the voice. I want to be the bird on your shoulder that keeps reminding you, America's changing. The question is, are you ready? Are you woke? Are you staying woke? Did you just wake up for a second and then go back to sleep? I mean, just what that even means as we hear people using these terms, using these words. So that's the first place we want to start if we're looking at it in the A, preparation, the academics, the scholarship, the preparation, skill development, knowledge. Let's go to number 2. Now, I don't know about y'all. Now, I'm a big fan of John Powell and the work they're doing, first at the Curran Institute, now in Berkeley. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I still don't think people are clear about what belonging even means. I mean, is Harvard a community where everybody feels like they belong? Is the graduate school? What about your school? Is your school where all families feel like they belong? What does that even mean? Again, I feel like as we look at just this term of belonging, which can't we argue in the last 10 years, this is new language? This is relatively new language that people are using, even in having conversations about diversity and inclusion. I was reading about, and you can see this in the top of this. I got a link I'm going to share. I'll put it on this. I have a link that's talking about Citibank, Zillow, some corporations that are now moving away from diversity and inclusion. They're using belonging as a language. And it made me think, like, what does that even mean? What do I even mean by that? So I think that there is going to be some real interesting challenges ahead of us over these next 25 years. As we're now seeing, I mentioned to Isaiah, Iowa, where people are saying, hey, I mean, you talk about 1619, I feel like you're attacking me. I don't feel like a part of the community. Like, how are we going to be responsible? What does belonging even mean? Can you create belonging in an institution designed by white people for white people? How long does it take? Is it belonging a lifetime commitment? What do you need to feel that belonging, to sustain? These are the things I'm asking people to dig a little deeper when people are using these terms, using this language, which I'm sure y'all have done there within RISE, but I'm talking, I mean, in many of the places that I'm operating in, people are throwing around these words and not having any real clarity about what they mean. And I think over these next 25 years, there's going to be a real need for us, if we're going to be talking about belonging, to be specific, to be clear. Woo. Dismantling racism and oppression. Man, we got people still think racism means prejudice, bias. think about this sheet. When you look at this sheet here, this slide here, think about the words you're looking at that didn't even exist 10 years ago. All right, you think about when we talk about this commitment, right? That some things that people are working on didn't even really have a presence in the institution 10 years ago. Do you remember when it used to be LGBT? Y'all remember that? Now we have LGBTQI. Some people say plus A. Right? Like, just think about just that area of knowledge, that area of experience, of expertise in the last 20 years. I mean, how many of you are required to use your gender pronouns in your school building? How many of you have an all-inclusive restroom in your school building? Is that going to be the future of school buildings? How many of you are using the term BIPOC? How many of you even know what that means? You remember when it was just people of color? I mentioned something about white supremacy, but what about microaggressions? How many of you deal with microaggressions every day? The research shows people of color 10 to 40 times a day. Now, let me ask you this one. How many of you believe that everybody can be a racist? I learned that only white people could be racist in my early days of getting into the work. This slide, when we talk about this commitment to dismantling, I mean, we got to be even clear that people even have a definition of racism that is shared. And when you talk about oppression, is microaggression oppression? This is, I think, for those of us in the work right now, for these next 25 years, this slide is an attempt on my part to be really talking about what are we committed to dismantling? What's that going to look like? What's it going to require? Where is there some clarity, some ambiguity in reference to definitions? I heard, my good sister Darnisa talking about color blindness in a way that, sometimes I describe it differently and just outright, I don't have room for it. She's really helpful for me. She helps a brother to just open up a little more, because some days I just ain't got room for it. You know what I'm saying? What you talking about colorblind? This is 2021. I mean, we now have the evidence. That's BS, bad sociology. Nobody's colorblind anymore. We now have brain science that proves this, right? But I mean, she's right. You got to have some room there. I know that living in Iowa, living in the Midwest, just again, how some folks are just, that's where they're starting. So it's been helpful. The reason I put it there, because it reminds me of how sometimes I'm a little impatient, but if you're creating a community of belonging, if you're dismantling racism and oppression, you got to have some flexibility, some openness. So I just want to acknowledge that even Dr. Diversity's got some work to do on this slide. But this is a slide about the challenges ahead. That I'm okay with a commitment to dismantling. I just feel like we're allowing too many people to say they're about the work, but they're not really showing examples of doing the work. There's no real understanding, no competency. There's still some real ambiguity out there. And we've got so much going on in reference to these terms, to these topics, that we just got to be really sure about what we mean. And now you take Professor Kendi's work, who now, I mean, I give some real credit to Professor Kendi, because he doesn't own this term like he invented it. He didn't colonize the term and say it's mine, which is really important. Acknowledging particularly the women of color, like Angela Davis, Gloria Ladson Billing, Geneva, all those sisters who were, I mean, taking some real hits in the academic community, pushing and challenging around this terminology. I mean, his journey to this term is just really an interesting and profound story in itself. But the bottom line is now he's given us two categories. You're either racist or you're anti-racist. I mean, think about that. I mean, this is one of the most picked up books, most consumed subject matter in the last year. And now you got people saying they're going from not understanding diversity and inclusion to now saying we're committed to anti-racist. So this is where I think, again, this commitment, it's really important. This is rigorous work. This is difficult work. And I often feel like the work of diversity is continuing to be a term that many people latch on to, but I'm not sure if it's effort that people are putting in to get it done. And Kendi is really clear, which I think helps us now. We now have the ability to apply some rigor when we talk about this commitment. He talks about persistent, constant, regular. Like you don't get to read the book partially. You don't get to participate only on the diversity holidays. It's not just 28 days in 1 month. I love that he now says, if you're racist, okay, you can stay in that lane, but just let us know. But if you're anti-racist, this is the journey. This is the mindset it takes. And I think we have a real opportunity when we're talking about commitment now to have some real rigor associated with that. I like that. And now everybody doesn't like this about Kendi's work. Some people disagree. He puts everybody in this category of racist. Like we can all be racist now. We can all pursue anti-racism now. Now, there's been some pushback on that, and that's, I think, a conversation worth having. But the point is evolution. This is where we are now. This is what's going on around us. As we look at these next 25 years, which is what I'm arguing, which I'm talking to people about, is what's going to be the work the next 25 years. I know you've done some great work. I know you're doing some good work, but I'm wondering, what's the work ahead? What's the work ahead? All right, I wanted to get to some questions pretty soon. This is what I've been working on the last 15 months, just in the lab, trying to come up with my own model to really work with people who want to make this commitment to being anti-racist individually, but also as an institution. I don't have a lot of time to go into that, but I just wanted to give you a visual, and I'll include this in your slides, but this has been my working model because again, I think lots of folks have different stuff out there, but I just wanted y'all to know Dr. Diversity has been in the lab cooking up some ideas about if you're committed, which I think we need a level of cross-fit diversity. This is what I've always argued, that I wanted to be a space, a place where people, once they've done some diversity work, are now ready for the next level. And I feel like not hierarchical to make you better than, but there are some folks who are expertise in some areas that require some additional hours, some additional commitment, some dedicated time. And I think diversity sometimes frustrates me because it's the only space and place where people think they can literally read a book and be ready for the content. Sometimes they think just because they Black, they're experts, or people of color. And so I've really wanted and continue to try to create a space and place where we have, like we do in all of our curriculum, some levels of rigor that are assigned to where you're going in reference to what you put in reference to your expertise, if that makes sense. That's my becoming anti-racist model. Why? Because stuff is going to go down. I mean, this is what we know for the next 25 years, y'all. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen, but we know something's going to happen in America. You think about this last year, even these last 5 years that, rides has been in existence. Think about the things that have happened since the time y'all have been meeting, the current events, the headlines. I mean, think about just this last 6 months. I mean, you could think about just this last month. I mean, you could go to sleep at night, wake up the next day. I mean, we've always heard people say racism is maybe not as bad, or, I mean, maybe even some folks have said racism is over. But I don't remember publicly too often seeing a major speech by a Black man saying, we're there. Now, should you have this conversation in your school building? Are you prepared to have this conversation? Are we open to these folks working with our kids? I mean, this is where we are now in reference to the expansion of some of what people even think about when they think about, politics, political affiliation. To me, it's not really, Republican, Democrat, but I do think we got to have some skills. We got to be ready for folks to be bringing some ideas, some thoughts, some pushback, some resistance that we may have not ever encountered that pushback and resistance. I mean, diversity, right? We believe in diversity, right? Everybody, y'all remember that old rap song, right? Everybody in the club gets tipsy, right? We want to be open to all, right? And so that's really what I think this slide is really just an example for y'all to think about, for us to think about just what's been happening, even in the existence of rides, but definitely just in our last 10 years, our last 5 years, even the last year. Now we have people who can't even define critical race theory, want to bring it into critical race theory. I mean, this is something that we're hearing in school districts, in school buildings, that we never really hadn't heard to this level. I mean, we've heard some pushback around white kids feeling guilty about slavery. I mean, we've had to, and hopefully teachers and educators have built their skills so they can, make sure that that's not how kids are feeling attacked. We don't want that to be the message of the lesson. Of course not. But to blanket and say cancel, I mean, this is a level of commitment to dismantling that we're going to have to face, and brings in the question, is this what we mean by diversity? So as I get to the end, let me say just a few more things. Number one, power matters. Okay, that this is not a presentation about white supremacy, white privilege, and other forms of oppression, but I'm saying we need to have a presentation about white supremacy, white privilege, and other forms of oppression. I mean, we got to have that topic, particularly for those of us who are working in institutions, systems, organizations designed in a narrow way. Power is important. You got to understand it. Just some action items for us all. You got to speak up. I say it this way: the best friend that hate has is silence. And we need, especially young people, I work with them around just having some voice. It's not that, if there's one thing my family has taught me about diversity, there's some pancakes you'll never flip over. It's not like you're going to change everybody, right? But at least having a voice. And thank goodness for some Black and brown sisters out there for the last year or two. Woo! My goodness, showing up and showing out. Past, present, and hopefully in the future. But we gotta, I think, continue to model, but also inspire our young people to speak up. The best friend that hate has is silence. I never met a quiet jerk in my life. Usually their numbers are small, but their bark is big. That's one thing I'm asking people as an action item. And to keep learning, keep growing, keep expanding your knowledge. Some of these texts y'all are familiar with, y'all know. Some of them are on the horizon, like my good friend Yusuf Salam has got his new book just releasing as part of the Exonerated 5, Better Not Bitter, which I think can be really appropriate for all students and all faculty and staff thinking about some of the challenges we have to face. So these are some texts, again, that many of you are familiar with. I'll share this, but we just got to keep growing our knowledge, keep expanding our knowledge. We tried to create an action tool to help people work specifically on policy that is narrow, policies that are limiting, organizations, systemic designs that are narrow. And so that's what this is here. Now, look, we tried to make it broader. I do have a link from Professor Tima Okun, who looks at white supremacy culture. So I want to be clear, what you see in the red is red because it can be danger when you click on it. It's high level, right? But what's underneath is kind of a general way you can work through policies, decisions to really, consider some different answers. And it can be race supremacy, it can be ability supremacy, it can be language supremacy, it can be religious supremacy. So you can put anything in front of privilege and supremacy and work through that. Noticing it, feeling it, interrupting it. That's the goal there. That's a longer presentation, but I want to give you that tool. If any of you folks of color, BIPOC folks, working in historically white institutions, organizations, the research is clear. In general, I would argue, if you're fighting for justice, even in the most progressive places, that it can take a toll on you. Now, for me, as a Black man, I had to relearn what it means to practice self-care. Because I learned going to a historically white place for college, for education, that you got to get up earlier, work harder, stay there later, work harder. Like you almost have to kill yourself. That was the answer to success. I literally remember laughing at the people in England saying, who takes a month off from work? That just doesn't seem like it's humanly possible. What human being needs that much time? My mama would have never took that much time off, right? That's what was in my mind when thinking about self-care. This is a really important part that I wish we had more time for, but the point is, if you're gonna be pursuing this line of work, pushing, if you're gonna stay on the ride, even though rides is ending, but you plan on riding on out, right? You got to take care of yourself. And I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, can tell some stories of the importance of this. Now, for me as a Black man, two texts that I use are Joy DeGruy and Resmaa Menakem's work. And I was so ill prepared for self-care, I had to create an action plan to do that. And that's what you see there, the 21-day action plan that's listed there. Speaking of the 21-day action plan, again, competency, skills, going back to what my good sister was saying early, all right? Now, again, what I've been facing as a frustration is many people at the workshop, at the keynotes, educators, especially teachers, even more specifically, coming up saying, okay, Eddie, this was great. Okay, Doc, we loved it, but what do I do? What do I do? And so I had been always paying attention to these diets and exercise kind of gimmicks, 21-day habit building. And I thought, what if we did that for social justice, right? If you're woke, would you like to stay that way? What's a way to maybe continue with the journey or continue on the journey? That's the idea of the 21-day action plan, okay? People used to say, okay, Eddie, are you optimistic? Are things getting better? I asked y'all earlier, Thurgood Marshall, are you feeling pretty optimistic about the future or pessimistic? I tell people I had to invent a new word. I'm not optimistic, I'm not pessimistic, I'm what I call pistomistic. Pistomistic means you're optimistic, but you're doing things, you're taking action. And so I'm gonna share with y'all, this is, as we have some questions rolling in, Candace, I'm going to share with y'all, this is a 21-day action plan. If you want to do something tonight for 21 days in a row, which the research shows, if you do it 21 days in a row, it starts you on a habit. Are you woke? Are you staying woke? Would you like help staying awake? First of all, if you're woke, what does that even mean? I argue it's like pushing against status quo, not letting it go back to normal. That's what woke means to me. But it also means that I was asleep at some point. Sister Darnisa mentioned this as well. Like, we all got some work to do. So when I say I'm woke, that means I'm acknowledging that I was actually sleeping at some point. So what woke you up? Was it George Floyd? Was it Breonna Taylor? I mean, what shook you out of your sleep? So for me, when I'm talking to people about staying woke, it's an action commitment. One thing a day, that's all I'm asking. One thing a day. This is something that can help you with that if you're interested. Okay. Now, Candace, I do have like 8 more slides, I think, but I'm going to pause right there because I do want to see, I see there's some questions in there. I wanted to see if you got 1 or 2 or I could respond to. I appreciate folks putting them in there, but I wanted to just pause right there just to see if there are any questions. And I'll send y'all the rest of the slideshow, which is a reminder of the late, great John Lewis and getting in some good trouble, which is, for me, part of staying woke. And then again, not going back to normal is what I use to tell people about staying woke. And I'm wondering, will we ever end racism? Dismantle racism, oppression? This is going to be my last slide, but I'm not going to do this one yet. I'm going to see if there are a couple questions. But my question to y'all is, will we dismantle racism? Ever? Will we end oppression? Ever? That's my question to y'all, for y'all to rhetorically reflect on, us, I should say, to rhetorically reflect on during the conference, because I'm here to the end as much as I can be here. And but first, let me see what's in the, Candace, can you help me out? Because
I will, absolutely. So such big questions, and thank you for offering all of those resources. I was frantically trying to put them into our Padlet while you were talking. Let me tell you what the 2 questions are, and then you can decide what order you want to take them. And then as I'm talking, other folks may also have questions. So there's one question here from actually our rides facilitator, Cersei, and she's asking, I regularly reflect on my white father's recognition from 10 years ago that despite best intentions, he is racist, which is why he is committed to also being anti-racist. That is, he is simultaneously racist and anti-racist. Wondering if you have any thoughts on that idea. That's one question. And then the second question really quickly is also from our rides facilitator and your colleague, Dr. Darnisa Amante-Jackson. Really love your thoughts on breaking silence. Have you seen any strategies that help break silence when power is at play with students, teachers, administrators, etc.? So those are our 2 questions so far.
Okay, great. Thank you both. 2 dear people that I know and love to stay in contact with. If I miss something on this, just trying to be concise. To Cersei and her father, I think it's okay. And I believe Kendi, in my understanding of his work, really lays this out as well, that there is often a little dance, so to speak, that there is some, I don't know if I would use relapse, but some back and forth when you're, really moving on this journey to becoming becoming anti-racist. And what I would say to your father, that the acknowledgement of that racist behavior is part of that journey. And I think just having a plan. My question to your dad is, what are the action items? What are you doing as a part of your examples of becoming anti-racist? Is it, just a movie? Is it an article? Like, give me some substance. I believe we let people off the hook too often. That people talk about, oh, I love diversity. I'm committed to diversity. I'm down with learning more, right? But we often believe them, take them on their word. And what I'm saying, when you look at the stats and facts across the nation, particularly in education, I mean, somebody's lying. Somebody's not telling the truth about this commitment. And so let's now institute a accountability initiative. And that's what I would do for your father, Cersei, is just wonder, what are those things he's doing? And really continue to show him some other resources out there. And the breaking silence, I mean, for me, Darnisa, I think about two things for me. One is as some of my silence is woven into my identity as a faith-based person. For example, like I learned so much hate and so much bias that's entrenched in my behavior in the name of Jesus. So some of my silence, I think, has to be practiced in the places I'm the safest, or I was somewhat convinced and entrenched with these behaviors. The toughest work I have to do is with the people I love the most. And that's where I remind myself that I'm not going to convert my sister on some of these issues, my brothers on some of these issues, some of my extended family members, but I want to be a role model for my nieces and my nephew, that somebody is speaking up. And I believe anything you do over and over and over again, you'll get better at it. Let's just say you decide to be a jerk for the rest of the summer, spring, summer. By September, Labor Day, you will be a super jerk. You'll be better at it. And I think that's the motto I give for kids, that speaking up, having voice is a practice. So make sure you're strengthening that voice. And not every time is it going to be a long sermon. Sometimes it's just ouch. Sometimes it's like, come on, you know better. Hey, okay, I'm going to let you try that again. Right. So there could be some strategies like that. My greatest frustration around that, though, is we're too often letting racists be described as, oh, that's just the way Eddie used to be. That's just how he grew up. We're letting sexist, homophobic, anti-Semitic people do some oppressive stuff, and we're in many cases providing alibi-like excuses for them. And I'm saying minimally, let's call a racist. And let's also just continue to practice to have voice in our tough spaces as well as public spaces. Hopefully that helps. Candace?
Well, those were our only two questions in the chat. There's some really great conversation happening in the chat, but those were the only two questions that I saw. It's also time for us to begin to wrap up, but don't worry, folks. Dr. Moore will be back. He is one of our breakout session presenters. So if you're interested in learning a bit more about his book, you can see him after the break. Dr. Moore, last words, and then we'll just conclude and send folks to a break.
I just used Obama, I used Harriet Tubman, I used the Washington football team as things we've often seen happen that no one thought was possible. And so as we look at the challenges of dismantling racism and oppression, that there are times it seems daunting. But I just want to remind us that there are some folks, even in our lifetime, that have made some major things happen that I know in my mind I never thought was possible. And so that's where I'm focusing, turning my energy, is to really dismantle and believing that it's possible. And so I hope we can be in collaboration in any way to do that. And thank you, Rise, for allowing me to be a part of this farewell celebration.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Please join me in the chat in thanking Dr. Moore for sharing his resources and his thinking with us. He has been generous in providing his contact information as well. And so if you'd like to follow up with him, you can feel free to do that using the email address, and we'll also post a version of his slides to the Padlet.